I'm Tree and this is Stitchless TV, and today we're going to make a gorgeous top and we're going to make it out of a cot blanket. The reason why we use a cot blanket is because look, it's just the right size for making a top and we can retain all of this gorgeous finished edge. If we just used a regular blanket, then we'd have to finish it off, and the whole thing about it is that we do it as quickly as possible. The first thing we're going to do is we've got to line up the blanket. I folded it over and we make sure that all the edges are perfectly matched up. Okay, so they're all perfectly matched up. Now I'm going to measure, where's my tape measure? I'm going to measure how long I want the top to be. Now I like my tops quite short. So for me, measuring from the centre of the shoulder, I think that's okay. Now that says 18 inches, which is 45 centimetres. And we're going to transfer that measurement onto here. And then we'll basically just cut all along. So what we need to do, we just go along. I've got this here as my marker to know how long it's supposed to be. And then all I'm doing is I'm just following the line of the fabric. So we go all the way along. You imagine the possibilities. All those gorgeous children's cot blankets, baby cot blankets. You could be turning into the most amazing tops, and they're often in really good quality cottons and wools. See this section here? Okay, this is going to become an excellent roll neck on our top, but we don't need it yet, so I'm just going to put it to one side for the moment. Right, we need to think about the neck a little bit, so I'm just going to get that piece that we just cut off. Okay, and just, how is it going to be? Okay, I think it's going to be something like that, but I just want to make sure that we've got enough material to do it, because when we do the neck we need to scoop down the front a little bit. So let's just have a look. Yeah, look, there's plenty of it there. We're just going to establish where the middle of the neck is, so we can then shape the neck. So we get our tape measure, lay it across. We've got 87 centimetres, so maths, 43 and a half, 43 and a half. I'm going to keep my finger there. Now this is really important, okay? Don't cut through both of them, just the top one, because we're doing the front. And whenever you do necks, they come down a bit more at the front than they do at the back. So making sure you're just cutting the front, stop where your finger is and then fold it over so that it's going to be symmetrical. Now you can change this if you think it's not enough. You obviously can't make it smaller, but you can make it bigger. So if you think that's roughly symmetrical, I mean, I'm not really that fast, but I'll just roughly look. So there's 30 there. Oh, look at that, I'm a genius, and there's 30 there. Okay, now we're gonna cut the back as well, but just before we do that, I just want to roughly get a sense of what it will look like. So I'm measuring across and I'm allowing for seam allowance, sort of 2 centimetres on each side. And I'm just going to take it to the mirror and just see what it looks like. Yeah, I think that's great, because I want it to be quite a slash neck. Now you probably think, God, I can't do this without a pattern, but you really can, because look, all it is a rectangle and we're only roughly scooping. You know, most of these things that you buy, they're probably not scooped at all, it's just a slash. Now we've got to cut the back as well, just a little bit. There's hardly any shaping in the back section, but just sort of, you know, just make it up. And the reason why a lot of my tutorials actually are made from knitted things is because it hides a multitude of sins. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to stitch the shoulders, but you can't do it like this until you put it right sides together. So let's get right sides together. So fold it over, go like that. Now the annoying thing about knitwear is that when you cut it, it does roll. I'm sorry about that, nothing I can do. So the best thing to do is to start on the finished edge, because we want that finished edge to stay together. And then as we sew, coming to the neck, make sure you've got the finished ends, you're sort of holding them together, because otherwise one could slip and then it will be not straight. Let's go over to the sewing machine. So I've got it on a fairly large stitch, about number 3, and I'm making sure that the 2 finished edges are together, and I've got the right colour thread. Yep, I've got the right colour thread. Foot, where are you? Now as you sew, before you begin, be aware of where you're going. Right, okay, so that's one side. Trim off all your bits of thread, and then you just do the same on the other side. Right, so this is what it should look like. We've sewn both of the shoulder seams, cut off all your loose threads, and then, sorry, I've got loads of fluff on my nose. Cut off all your loose threads, and then I'm going to trim back our seam, which is kind of like 1.5 centimetres to about 0.5 centimetre, so it's ready for zigzag. So we've trimmed back the seams, both of the shoulder seams, and now we're just going to zigzag all along this edge and this edge to finish it off. Like most sewing machines, they have straight stitch and zigzag, even if they're really basic sewing machines. So I've got to turn it to the zigzag stitch. I've put it on about number 5 for the zigzag gradient or whatever it is, and number 3 on the sides of the stitch, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, and off we go. And whilst we're zigzagging the shoulder seams, we may as well continue all the way along the back as well onto the other shoulder seam. So now we've just got to zigzag all along the scoop of the front. So I'm going to do that now as well. So we've zigzagged the shoulders, we've zigzagged along the back, and we've zigzagged along the front of the neck. Now the reason why we do that is because if we don't do that, all the wool will just fall apart. Once it's been knitted on a knitting machine, if you just cut it, it just falls apart really easily. In fact, I probably should stay stitch it as well. I might do that. But when you sew it, do not pull it, because if you pull it, it will just go all up and down, all ripply. So I'm just going to stay stitch all around the neck at the front and around the back. So now we're going to do a stay stitch, and you probably are wondering, what's a stay stitch? A stay stitch is basically what it says, is to keep things in place. It's to make them stay in position. So it might be to hold fabric so it doesn't stretch out of shape, or it might be to hold 2 fabrics together. So it's not about stitching a seam, it's about keeping things in place. So I'm going to do that now. Now remember to push your shoulder seam towards the back. We have this kind of law in dressmaking, although I say I don't use traditional techniques, that all seams get pressed to the back. Side seams pressed to the back, shoulder seams pressed to the back. So that's what I'm doing now. So stay stitch, don't need to go backwards and forwards. Just stitch about 3/4 centimetre in. Now as you sew, don't pull the fabric, keep it all nice and flat. So you should have something like this, so it's going to go there. But what we need to do now is we've got to open it out, because when we cut it, it was folded, and we're going to fold it over right sides together. And I've decided to keep this little bit of edging here, and I'm going to make that fall at the back. And then we're just going to stitch down there with a seam allowance of about 1 centimetre. So using a straight stitch, we're going to stitch down the centre back of the neck. So we've just stitched this seam here. So open out the seam, close it, wrong sides together now, and you should end up with something like this, which is going to be, if I got loads of fluff in my hair, which is going to be the neck, like that. Right, so what we're going to do, we're just going to stay stitch all around here so that we keep these 2 pieces together, because otherwise they're just going to slip all over the show. So I'll do that now. So as you sew, it's really important, just for the neck whilst we're stay stitching, to stretch as we sew, because we don't know if it's going to fit or not, so we might need to stretch it. And if we haven't stretched it like this as we sew, if we don't stretch it like that, then we need to stretch it on the actual top, then it's not going to stretch. Right, we need to establish where the sides are, but if I notch this, because it's all fluffy in that, it's not going to show. So I've got to think of a way of how to mark it, and often I use the iron pressing things as a way of marking things. So I'm going to do that now. So just give it a good old press. Look, if I steam and press, then you'll see it's kind of apparent where the sides are because they're pressed. So this is the moment of truth now. We've got to put right sides together. I've got my centre back at the back of the actual top. I'm holding it there. I'm aware of where the side is, and I'm going to hold it. It's going to go across to the side seam and then around the front and end up at the beginning again. So I'm going to talk you through it, okay? Don't worry. You can always, when you've got a difficult job going on, you can always just work in small sections at a time. You don't have to do it all in one go. Like, you can say, okay, I'm going to start at the centre back and I'm going to work my way to the side seam, and I'm going to stop there for a little breather, even take it off the machine and then start again. You don't have to do it all in one sweep, okay, because you're not a professional like me. So let's go. So I've got my side seam, I'm matching it up with the side seam on the top. Now remember that the knitted fabric is really forgiving. So you can stretch, if it seems like it's not fitting, you can stretch it a little bit. Okay, even us so-called professionals don't always get it right. Now, because I didn't have it positioned properly in the first place, I got to a point where it's like, oh my God, I can't turn it anymore. Don't worry, it's no problem at all. Just stop and just reposition it. So for me, it's pulling the whole enormous top through the whole of the neck so that I can get it in position properly. Right, and then off we go again. Oh, God, did you get loads of fluff up your nose? Right, okay. So you should be at this stage. How did you get on? Was it all right? It's a little bit of a nightmare having to stretch one and make it fit, but you know, it's very, very forgiving, isn't it? Stretchy fabric. Now all we got to do, we just got to zigzag that edge and then we can have a look. I just zigzagged all around here, so it's all finished off. Shall we have a look at what it looks like? Are you ready? So, seam at the back. I'm going to try it on my dummy so I don't get fluff all over me. Oh my God, look at that. Well, clearly, you could just leave it like that because that's just like a cape. Just show you the back.